Good morning, potato chips. How you doing? We Paddy from across the shuck, and back at you with another video. And you'll see by the title, it's going to be something like most frequently asked question is, Paddy, can you recommend a knife? And the first thing I have to say is, do you have a budget? Which is what I normally would have said, and then we'll talk about, what knives you have, what you like, what size you want, what you're going to use it for. It's just not a really straightforward question. So I want to make this video for maybe those out there who are just getting around, they're not sure, they're feeling their way, and a better way to ask the question. Because the first question I'm going to ask, I'm going to ask now, if you ask me a question, and it's changed. 5 years, it just changed a whole lot. And blades and knives have changed. In 5 years, the whole scene has completely changed. An awful lot of really high-end knives now, not so many on the budget. And it used to be a lot of channels would have done high and low. Now you get a low one thrown in just to hit that spec on your YouTube ratings. But the next time anybody asks me that, the first thing I'm going to say is, can you sharpen? Dead simple. Because if you can't sharpen, me recommending a knife based on it's a good knife, whether it be budget, medium, high, and blade steel, which can be low, medium, high, it's too big a scope to just fire out knives at you. The one thing I won't do is recommend a knife that I've never used. I'll just say, I don't know, I've never used it. But I will recommend, and in 5 years, I have tested and used so many knives, it's unbelievable. You go back through my channel, I don't have many videos, there's an awful lot, and an awful lot of different knives, and some that even never even made it to the channel. But if I've used them, I'll recommend them if I think they're good to be recommended. But if you can't sharpen, it doesn't matter what knife I recommend, it's going to go blunt. So the first thing in future that I'm going to ask is, can you sharpen? Because I can't answer that question that you're giving me until I know can you sharpen? If you can, it doesn't matter what I recommend. It genuinely doesn't. But if you don't sharpen, if I recommend an M390, to start sharpening on an M390, which is going to be a higher end blade, that's not good information. The knife is good, but if it goes blunt on you and it sits there because you can't afford to send it away to get sharpened for £30, whatever the boys charge for sharpening, and they do a good job, and if you can afford that and you don't want to learn to sharpen, more part of your elbow, because I would do it. Although I do like sharpening, a lot of the times, if I've used a lot of knives, I'm quite happy send them away. I won't, but I would be quite happy. I couldn't really afford that. So the first question I'm going to ask anybody now is, can you sharpen? And what standard is your sharpening? It sounds like a simple question again, and it is a simple question. If you can't sharpen, the recommendations on the knives that I would tell you to try now are all knives that are cheap enough that you can practice sharpening on. What's going to be my first recommendation for a sharpening? It's going to be this. It's going to be the Lansky Turnbox. This is, you get a ceramic and you get a diamond. You get two of each. So this would be either two of these or two of these on here. So ceramic is giving you a nice hone more than anything else and giving you a hair splitting sharp edge, but you have to get the edge there. And that's why the diamond, make sure you get one with diamond and ceramic. This will sharpen M390. It'll take longer than it will to sharpen a Victorinox knife, which is about a 12C27 blade or somewhere around there, which is an easy knife to sharpen. So the first thing, I will recommend this, because this is one I've used. You can see this is I still use this. If at the end of the day I've just used a knife a wee bit more than it needs a strop, I will use this just to give it a quick hone up, because I never really blunt my knives too hard. I don't like to go to a blunt knife. I'd rather sharpen it in between use. The other thing I'm going to tell you to get is a strop. The better and more useful the strop is, the better your stropping will be. This one is about 3 inches wide, which gives you plenty of room for an average side blade to go down the whole strop. And you're going to get a bit of everything and come back up the whole strop. Stropping is one of the easiest things to teach somebody to do. So I'll certainly give you any help that you want for that. But recommendations, what knives are going to make? Here's where I've changed. Look, if you can sharpen and you're just starting out in knives, that means you've already had knives. So these bottom two, I'm just gonna rule them out because they're just cheap knives. And now there's nothing wrong with them, and they cut. This is the Rat 1, and they got the Rat 2, which is a smaller version. This is a Victorinox, which is a fantastic. This is the solo blade one. And if you just want an office knife, if you want that sort of recommendation, what knife could I take into the office? This is it. This, you can go anywhere with this. Weddings, office. It's a fantastic knife. Costs about £26 or something like that. It's just a slip joint, but it doesn't matter that it's just a slip joint. It's a fantastic knife. You just have to sharpen it much more or strop it much more. At the end of the day, if you strop these, they'll come back as good as they were when you left in the morning. If you want a hard use knife, yes, this is a hard use knife. It's been about for donkey's years, which is why I'm not going to recommend it anymore. It is a good enough, it's a good enough knife. It's an Aussie steel. You can get the D2 version, which is a bit more expensive, but to take this knife apart, if I'm going to recommend it to somebody and you're going to use your knives and you're going to have to take them apart to clean them, you want to find out what they're like inside, look how many standoffs that has got. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 standoffs to unscrew and get out, and then your pivot. That's just too much. Why would I give somebody that's just around knives that sort of problem to take a knife apart? Because we all want to see what they're like inside when we first come around. So, I wouldn't recommend that. This one doesn't have to be taken apart because it's a slip joint and it's an office knife. It's great. But if you can't sharpen, something like this and something like this are fantastic knives to practice on. Fantastic. This is just a great user. This is a big work knife. You can get the smaller version if you want. So, but them two are sort of gone from my recommendations unless you can't sharpen. And if you can sharpen, you've probably got enough cheap knives anyway. Because when you come into this hobby, usually people coming in have got knives. So your cheaper ones, learn how to sharpen with them. So I'm not going to recommend cheap knives anymore. Other than if you're brand new around and you want to see what it's like, that's the best starter knife. And it'll let you carry a knife. It's not too big. It's not too small. It'll do most people's everyday task. But it's a great knife to sharpen. Who is going to start off with a blooming big knife this size in your office? It's like taking a pocket sword out. And I don't care whether it's legal or not. Well, you're not going to scare people. You're going to think, what the hell has he brought into the office? So start smaller and work up. The small Rat 2 is a perfect size, about the same size as this. So there we are. Cheap knives you've usually got when you come in. Practice sharpening. Buy the Lansky or whatever one you want, but the Lansky I'm recommending because it's so simple. Medium price knives. Medium price knives is now becoming a completely blurred discussion. Really difficult to, you have to ask somebody, what do you consider a medium price? These two knives here, I've just brought them out because one's a slip joint, one's a bigger working knife, which is the better version of this, and this here would be an upgraded version of this. This is in D2. This is a twisted assisted Best Tech Junzi, but they've made it smaller. Or not smaller, they made it a slip joint. Oh, for goodness sake, a slip joint for the UK lovers, or those that have got a 3-inch limit on blades that are locking. So this is a fantastic knife in D2. This is also D2, and I call D2 a medium knife to start with because it's not as easy to sharpen as the cheaper knives, Oz8 and the Sandvik. They're easier to sharpen. D2, some people find it quite hard. I particularly don't, and if you're using that Lansky, there's no reason why you should unless it has a bad heat treatment. But the knives I'll recommend are ones that I hope that I'm going to recommend to you are heat treated pretty well because I've used them and I've got experience of lots of people having used them. QB, this one, what a fantastic work knife. Compared to this knife, this is like, it's like night and day. The blades are the same, except this is a big, long, flat grind, come down to a nice edge. Beautiful big working handle to get grip on. And as I say, the blades are about the same size. This is the modern version of this. This is outdated now. On the back of this, you have two standoffs and your pivot. That's all you've got to take apart to get in and see with the knife. It's a liner lock, the same as that. So you're going to get to see exactly as you would in that, but in a much easier form. Again, this one is a slip joint. It's a wee bit different when you're taking it apart, but there's lots of videos. And James over at Junsey has a video up of him taking it apart. And there's little nicks and, shortcuts that you can follow. If you follow somebody doing it, this would definitely be a great knife to have. Smaller office knife, around the house knife. This is the everyday, an EDC knife. This is a work knife. But look, that's as fidgety as any high-end knife. You've got so many ways to open it. Oh, you can do it the finger. You can do the, like I showed you, the flipper. It's absolutely fantastic. Look at that. That's just amazing. But you can also just put your finger in here and open it like that slowly, so it's not going to scare people, because this is a big knife. And if you're taking out this, you're getting so much. My hand is so full in this, so comfortable. You don't feel the clip. Just a fantastic work knife with D2. QB have numerous knives out there that are just this drop shotty and this good. So as a budget knife, this is what I'm going to class as a standard budget knife. But these are about £50 and £60 if you want a good budget knife. And budget, again, it's depending how much money you've got. It's so difficult to do, which is why I broke these up. These are £25, £30 for the cheaper ones. But you should... Well, the chances are you'll have some cheap knives before you come along. And whatever them cheap knives are, they're the ones you start learning to sharpen. And if you can sharpen something like this, you can sharpen something like 20CV, CPM 20CV, or M390. It just takes a wee bit longer. And especially with a cheaper tool like this. But this is very, very effective. Don't let your knives go blunt, and that will last you your lifetime. And that's the truth. I mean, you can get... There's fixed systems now. The Worksharp have got a fantastic one at a budget price, £50, and that includes your sharpening stones. It's just fantastic, and it will do any of the knives because it's got diamond stones, as long as your knives are not completely blunt. And I'm going to say that because they then have to buy the more coarse stones to get the job done. So another two knives that I could recommend if you want to go from the budget of the just over the £100, 100, up to about 130. It could go up to 150 from 60, 50 to 60. This is up to the mid-range, probably, I would say. This is the mid-range, and it's the sort of from 60 up to about 150 seems to be about mid-range now. And there's plenty of option out there. So many knives. Here's two that at the minute are just two of my favourite little knives. This is a smaller one. It's the Benchmade 945, which is a smaller version of the 940. I'm sure everybody knows it. But my goodness, is this a great pen knife. The 940 is a great work knife. This is a great pen knife. Do you know what I mean? It just sits in your hand. Super little knife that's not going to scare people. But it's got a good blade steel, 30CV, S30V on this, which will last you all day long. And at the end of the day, a quick hone and a strop, and you're ready for the next day. I love S30V, probably one of my favourite steels. That's just does everything about right, but it's easy to sharpen. Here's another one, easy to sharpen steel. This is the Cold Steel American Lawman. I haven't long had this, and I absolutely love this as a hard use knife. I just think it's fantastic. Again, it's got that deep body, and when you're hard using something, you want this hand to be full. You want this to be full. You don't want a little skinny, because you're going to be putting pressure on your knife, whether it's up forward or back here. You want a full grip so that there's nothing moving, that, it's not moving up here. When you put a little skinny knife in here, it's very hard to get right down over it. With this, it's not. And that's why I would recommend these. This for a work knife, and this for an office knife or an EDC knife. This will do anything. Fantastic. S35VN. This steel was made to sharpen easy. Do you know what I mean? So absolutely fantastic. And look, I could do this 10 times over and put different knives here. So when you're asked the question, what sort of knife do you like? Do you like a lockback? Do you have that security of a cold steel for a hard use? This is more fidgety. You've got springs in it. They can break. You might have to change them. But, every knife can have a problem. You can't set out worrying about the problem. So this would be my mid-range. And then when you go to high range, there's so many people now when they come onto YouTube. Sorry, I'm going to have a wee drink. There's so many people when they come onto YouTube go straight into high-end knives. And that's fine if you can afford it. That's great. But I would start at the mid-range before you go to the high. Get used to what these blade steels are like. Because when you buy your high end, you want to buy a blade steel that you've used, sharpened, and so that you can move on to here. Because here, you're probably just a medium sort of sharpener, and you can do these two, S30V, S35VN. Once you go up to M390 and 20CV, you then you need proper stones, or you need a better sharpening system. The workshop can cover all that, and that's why I like it. And I'm going to be doing a new series on that workshop, because I spoke to Constantine in Russia, and he has sent me all the add-on parts that Grip-O-Matic. They make stones and parts for sharpening devices. They have a stack of them for the workshop. He's sending me a stack of different upgrades that you can use on the workshop. So I'm going to do a full video, not videos on the different applications as I put them on to that sharpener. The top two knives here are high end. And these two, I know I could recommend to anybody that's in the knife community. But if you're coming in and you can sharpen, these are two of the very best knives that you can buy. This is a Jack Wolf knives. And if you're just coming on to YouTube, you'll find these are the hot knives at the minute. And they're the hot knives for a reason. Ben Belkin, who makes these, well, he designs them down to every last spec. They're not sent away as a drawing to China. He designs this all himself on CAD, taught himself how to do it. He designs this down to the last millimetre. And these are just super slip joint knives. But they're a good office knife. Slip joints are not just for people who live in the UK. Slip joints are for anybody who likes a well-made knife and who likes a knife that's non-threatening. And even if it is legal, I keep saying this, even if it's legal to carry a sword, you don't necessarily have to. Because there's a lot of people are frightened of them. And people have had bad experiences with idiots with knives. We're not idiots with knives. So not being an idiot means don't scare people who are scared. In my eyes. I don't know what people feel on that, but there we go. That's my eyes. So this is not going to scare anybody. There's a whole different range of Jack Wolf knives. They're coming out once a month at the minute. Expensive? No. Are they worth the money they charge? Yes, in my opinion. These are about £250. There's ones with the fat carbon fibre are £275. Again, it's $275 in America and $300. So that's a lot of money for a knife. But this is for people who want it and have the money. And this is also for people in this bracket who, if you stay in the knife game long enough, you'll want up here to see what it's like. And it is different. There is a huge difference between these knives and these two knives here. To me, after 300, diminishing sort of, you're then going to people's names, reputations, these super steels that are out there. As a knife collector, I don't need them. But this Jack Wolf knives, this is the Night Stalker. This is a beautiful knife. Midnight Jack in the sheep's foot. And here is my best knife in my collection at the minute. This is my Hinderer 3-inch slippy. It's UK legal, but you don't have to live in the UK. Again, you've less moving parts in a slip joint knife, so very rarely anything goes wrong with them. But Hinderer has made this, that this is, you can sneak up beautifully here and the blade will never close on you. Or you can come back here and hold the handle here if you need a bit of reach, because even if it closed, it's covered. This does not cut you. This is one of the best designed slip joints. So it's easy to just use, put away. Nothing much will ever go wrong with this. This is a knife, and this is a knife you can hand down to your children. They're super knives. but their blade steels are harder to sharpen than any of these. Not a whole lot. It's usually more time. If you've got the right technique and you've got the right sharpening tools for you, the two that I'm really going to recommend is the Lansky and the Worksharp, because to me they're budget, but they're budget that does the job good enough. You'll not get that super mirror edge unless you keep using it to hone your knives and strop every night. Some of my knives, this one here, I mean, I sharpened it after I'd used it and blunted it. I sharpened it. Look at that mirror edge on that. But that mirror edge wasn't done by some fancy it's just every now and then during the night, for years, I just peel this out and I give it a quick strop. And that strop is what has brought that mirror polish. It didn't start off as good as that. It might have been, a good shiny edge, but this is completely mirrored now. And that's just 3 years of stropping. I don't use it a lot. But it looks lovely like that. And I'll let it get like that because most of my knives have not got a mirror edge. I don't need a mirror edge. I want it a wee bit toothy, but that's it. That's all I need. So I hope that makes sense to you if you're just coming around. When you're asking somebody to pick a knife, or not pick a knife, recommend a knife that it's somebody who you respect and you want to do it, make sure you tell them all the details. The price range you want to stay in, and also can you sharpen? Because that's so important. I am not going to recommend this to you as a first knife because of the blade steel. The knife is amazing. If you can ever afford one, get one. Highly recommend it, without a shout. Same as the Jack Wolf knives. But this £25 knife, it cuts just like this. Do you know what I mean? It just doesn't last as long. And that is the difference between low-end steel and high-end steel. And as you're coming up, you just get better and better steels, but you pay for it. So you have to realise that this will probably do my EDC most days. Absolutely. But I'm a knife collector, and that's what we're in YouTube for. That's why we're searching out people who we can we're looking to find people who are the same as us, who have done the same things, or the direction you want to go. I started way down here, and moved up gradually, but slowly but surely. And there comes a stage in your knife collecting, and that it nearly covers everybody, is when you get to where you're pushing your limit, there will come a time you have to save to get the next one. So you have to stop buying so many of this brand to get up here. You have to stop buying as many of these to get up to the middle brand. Wherever you are in the journey, there comes a point where you have to save. So my idea is, if you sharpen here and learn how to sharpen, you can nearly skip over that and go to the mid-range, which is 50 to 150. And then above that is the higher range. So there you go. Just a little help, maybe, if it helps you. If this is only going to be your limit that you want to go to, you have lucked out. You're really lucked in, I should say. This is the amount of knives in this bracket is phenomenal, and they're all good knives. Most of them are good knives. I could recommend 100 good knives nearly off the top of my head in this bracket alone. The cheap end, there's always plenty of them. But this, to me, this is, if you're breaking into the knife community, learn how to sharpen here, and then you can move right up to the top, or you can come up in incremental stages. That was a long video about nothing. Thank you so much for listening. I'm away for a wee cup of tea. Remember, tomorrow night is the Paddy and Pals podcast. This is our proper official first one. It'll only be on for about half an hour, 40 minutes. Pop along. We've got some great news for you. Good information to come. And we have the names of our first 4-ish guests that we're going to have on the podcast. So come along, enjoy the chat. Take care. Paddy's away. All the best now.